Great, thanks, O'Shea. I just turned on my video. Did my video come up?
I don't see it yet.
Yeah, you came up on the screen. You're on the, yeah.
Oh, it's probably because O'Shea's still sharing.
Yep.
Let me stop sharing. There you go.
There we go. There we go. So hello, everybody. This is my ugly mug. So let me share my screen. Okay, so last question. Everybody can see my screen, yes?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. All right, so one little update to the title is the Upgrade Your Attack Model Finding and Stopping Fileless Attacks. I think somewhere that got lost in the translation when I updated this slide. So this is a presentation I've given at SANS as well. So we're gonna go through this, and at the end we're gonna have a little Q&A session if you guys have questions. I will try to make up answers and go from there. So you know, greetings to everyone who came to learn a little bit about MITRE ATT&CK, and also a shout out to those here or just for their CPE credits. Glad I could help out with that. As O'Shea just mentioned, I got 20+ years in the security industry, mostly in IT operations. I only migrated to sales about 3 years ago. So internet security systems, I survived the internet security systems IBM acquisition in 2006 for 4 years before I left for Endgame in 2010. And then back in October of 2019, Elastico acquired Endgame, which has been a much more pleasant experience than the IBM acquisition. Nothing against IBM, just not my cup of tea. Nerd credentials, I have 1,500 comic books next to my desk right now. I'm not kidding. I haven't read or collected for quite some time now, but I have them within arm's reach if I ever get bored at work. So let's start off. So before we talk about the different models, let's talk a little bit about what an attack model is and why you should be using one. So moving on to this, I didn't really have a good answer for this. When I started thinking about, when I put this presentation together, I really didn't have a great answer. So I went to the all-knowing Google and found this from BSIM, the Building Security and Maturity Model. That, and I won't read this whole thing to you, but I think the first sentence says it all. The attack models capture information used to think like an attacker. And that's what we're trying to do here as defenders, is we're trying to think like attackers. And that's true whether that's a cyber or a physical conflict. In physical war, you need to think like your attacker in order to be able to build your defenses to protect against those enemies. So you need to know your enemy's capabilities. What happened? Sorry, I thought I wanted to go forward. So with apologies to Stephen Hawking, let's take a quick look at some other attack models, some of their strengths and weaknesses, and why I think they come up short a little bit. I don't want to have a big conversation about MITRE without having an idea of how we got there. So we'll start with the diamond security model. The diamond model defines the timeline in terms of diamond events. It can help a responder define the adversary capabilities, a target, victim, and infrastructure. It's a pretty basic looking template at first glance, but can be used to map out complex events. Note these two ovals here. The technology, why is it, I don't understand why it keeps doing that. Hello. Note the two ovals here, the technology oval and the social political oval. Especially the social political oval there, that makes you think about the motivations of the attacker. Are they political? Is it just a disgruntled employee? These things can make a difference in defining the capabilities, but maybe more importantly, the dedication of the attacker. If you've got a politically motivated attacker at your door, they're going to be a lot more dedicated to getting in than maybe just a disgruntled employee. So it's important to be able to understand what their motivation is, and that's one of the reasons why I like the diamond security model. And also, it's pretty simplistic to do it. So let's map an attack to the MITRE security model. So mapping the attack on the Death Star. So I can't take credit for this. I didn't create this. And obviously, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it gives you a good idea of how to map events to the diamond structure. So, you know, the capabilities, you know, the Force is a powerful ally. The adversary, Luke Skywalker, the infrastructure that they have at their disposal, and then the victim. In this case, where the Death Star and Emperor Palpatine are played as the victim. But one of the things I really like to point out about this is this, so again, the socio-political axis, ideological, revenge, intent, political upheaval. This is an adversary that's not going to give up easily. So again, it's important to know your enemy and know what their intentions are, because you know a little kid, you know, a script kiddie trying to do a Bitcoin miner browser insert is not going to have the same motivation as somebody who is interested in political upheaval. Next, we go to the cyber attack lifecycle. So this was developed by Mandiant many years ago, several years ago. And what I like about this model in particular is that it does a good job of showing the dwell time, the cycle of dwell time. The internal recon is escalate the privilege, do your internal recon, lateral movement, maintain presence, and just keep going, right? So this is how you're going to spread laterally across your network. What I don't like about it is that it defines a completed mission. The whole concept of dwell time is because the mission is never completed. It's to get as much information as you can. It's to do as much damage as you can, or to mine as much Bitcoin as you can. The mission is never over until we, as the defenders, stop it. So this is APT32 linked to that cyber attack lifecycle. And we're going to get to a theme here of how historical attacks are then mapped to a life cycle rather than being proactive in that mapping, right? So we see the initial compromise, the established foothold. Again, I really like this part right here where it shows that dwell time there and how they've established how to move laterally and how to maintain presence. Really nice. Again, we have the completed mission. The mission is never complete. But the dwell time here is a really nice, nice feature of the cyber attack lifecycle. The cyber kill chain. This usually is one that almost everybody has heard about, even ones that aren't familiar with attack models in general. The cyber kill chain is one that's very, very popular, and it's probably one of the older models out there. It's quite similar to the attack lifecycle, as you can see. It defines 7 steps of the attack, and does, you know, pretty much the same thing as the cyber the attack lifecycle that we saw before. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about the NIST security framework. So the NIST framework is a lot more detailed than just these little 5 columns. But the difference you're going to see with the NIST framework is that this is really more of a risk guideline framework than an attack framework. And so you're wondering why I showed you this. Well, it's an important framework because this is going to help you build your risk policies, your security guidelines. These are all things that you're going to have to put in your risk policies, your security policies, in order to, at the very least, pass your compliance checkpoints. But really, we all know that those risk frameworks are very important in building our security guidelines. So what's the problem with those? Nothing, really. They're all very useful models to define an ongoing or an historical attack. But that's kind of the point. These historical models tend to focus, in my opinion, on very generic overviews of techniques and are often used to map attacks after the fact. And that's useful, but isn't the point to try to stop attacks before they start in the first place? And that's where I think when we get into MITRE, that's where the difference is. So MITRE, if you're not familiar with the overall company, a lot of people are familiar with the MITRE attack framework, but not familiar with the company itself. So MITRE is a federally funded nonprofit. They do more than just security research, but they've become quite well known for their security research over the past 3 years or so. They've also started doing annual testing of various enterprise products against specific APTs. They don't announce winners and losers, and that's what I like about them. Users can evaluate the results for themselves. They are not a JD Power, they're not a Gartner where it's a pay for play kind of a thing. They're just going to give you the data of what they found and let you decide for yourself. So in fact, Elastic has provided these results of the raw test data. We didn't do this to make ourselves look good, because if we did, we'd be #1 in every category, and we're not. But this is a great place for you to go through all that data and take a look at it and see for yourself what the MITRE data is telling you. So this is a little view of MITRE attack, and I know this is hard to read, so don't worry about reading it too much, because there's even more stuff down here. But it's just an incredibly rich knowledge base of real world attacker data. But if you note, out of 300 plus cells, exactly one of them deals with traditional malware executables. This means that if you're only looking for malicious files, if you only have a little signature-based AV looking for malicious files, you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. So in the APT32 example we're going to go through, we're going to see not malware, but spear phishing. We're going to see scripting, launch agents, process injections, and scheduled task persistence. But other APTs are going to use other tactics across the matrix. So you just never know where an attacker is going to come from across this matrix, which is why you need to be able to understand, if you don't know what you're looking for, how are you ever going to find it? Okay, so let's take a little demo of going through the MITRE attack and how you can use it to help secure your enterprise. You don't use the matrix to stop attacks. You use the matrix to build defenses so that you can stop those attacks that attackers are using. So very quickly, they've used this. They've changed this since I made that slide to go from techniques to sub-techniques, right? So these are all the high-level techniques, and you can see each one of these. A lot of these have sub-techniques beyond that. So we can actually show all these sub-techniques, and then you can start to really see the rich infrastructure that MITRE shows us about what an attacker is trying to do, right? So if we go in through here, let's see if I'm trying to find the one that I was looking at before. So launch agent, I think is what I was looking at before. It doesn't matter. This is just one example of you click on a technique and you can start to get an idea of what it is they're trying to do. A lot of rich information, and not even more what software, and what groups are using that. So Ocean Lotus or APT32, same group, is using this technique. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, is an Ocean Lotus attack in just a couple of minutes. So this is extremely useful. It's extremely helpful. You can get a lot of information about what attackers are trying to do. But what I think is most useful is the attack navigator, right? So what this is going to do is it's going to let us see different pieces of malware, or excuse me, specific threat groups and the kind of techniques that they tend to use, specific software and specific mitigations. My favorite thing to do is when a new attack comes out and MITRE has started to map it, is to go through here and look and see what a software does. So here's one that I know we're all familiar with, which is, if I can find it here, WannaCry. So if I know WannaCry is out there in the wild and doing all sorts of nefarious, nasty stuff, I don't know what it is they're doing. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to see that what they're doing is they're using WMI. So I need to get protections around that. They're trying to do a lot of discovery, because what they want to do is they want to do lateral movement. So they want to discover where they can do their lateral movement, right? And then they're going to do some data encryption, inhibit system recovery. They're going to delete your VSS files. They're going to try to disable Windows Defender or whatever your antivirus is, and then stop those services. One of the first things that defenders try to do, or excuse me, attackers try to do, is not just stop Windows Defender, but actually delete Windows Defender. So not trying to crap on Windows Defender, but it is pretty easy for an attacker to disable and delete that. So that's one of my favorite things to do when a new attack comes out, is try to map that attack to the MITRE framework so that I can get an idea of what these people were doing as they made this tool, as they were making their way through your environment. So let's take a walk through APT32. We've just taken a look through several implementations or several instances of mapping different attack vectors to different models. Let's see what an attack APT32 looks like in MITRE, right? And remember, APT32 also associated with a group called Ocean Lotus, very active in Southeast Asia. So here's an overview of what we're going to see. We're going to see a spear phishing attachment, masquerading, scheduled task, scripting, process injection, custom command and control. Guess what we're not going to see here? Malware. We're not going to see a binary. We're not going to see a virus. So this is what is defined as a fileless attack. Now I got it. you can make the argument that there's a document attached and this makes it not fileless. But the traditional definition of a fileless attack is that no binary is used. So while the document is indeed a file, it's the macro within it that's actually malicious. So it's a fine line. It's like trying to find the difference between a switch and a router. But I'm going to go with the traditional definition today of a fileless attack because there's no traditional antivirus involved in this particular attack. So first technique, T1193, spear phishing attachment. So nice official sounding or official looking government email address here. You know, I'm sitting in front of a lot of security professionals who are probably laughing at what looks like a pretty lame email. But this was a very successful campaign. APT32 or Ocean Lotus have had a great deal of success, mainly in Southeast Asia, against both corporate and political victims. It's hard to determine what their real focus is. But suffice to say that this is what, this was a very successful campaign when they did this. So still on the spear phishing attachment, the attacker is counting on an end user to enable content for the document. So do security training, okay? I'm not here to tell you not to do security training. It's an important part of any security plan, but don't rely on it. Okay, studies have shown that despite the training, 4% or so of users are going to click on the link, or in this case, they're going to enable the macros button. So just a very quick soapbox moment, you know, let's realize these users are just people. They're just trying to do their jobs. They're often overworked just like we are, and they make mistakes. So a lot of admins, and I've been around these guys, make fun of them, call them idiots. You know, that's just going to make them less likely to report an incident later. So let's not be hard on the users. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox and let's see what happens next in this particular attack once the user has enabled content. First stage of the attack is they're going to try to defeat name-based defenses like app locker by using system files masquerading as other files, right? So they've gone into program data. Attackers love program data because by default, it's a hidden directory on your system. So users can't see the files in there. So what they've done is they've dropped this ying.exe, but ying.exe is actually wscript.exe renamed. So now they're going to try to do whatever they would do with wscript using this ying.exe executable. So what you need to defend against this technique, you need a tool that can identify attackers using masquerading to evade name-based defenses. T1053, a scheduled task. This is how they establish persistence. So they've established the persistence, a beachhead, if you will, in scheduled tasks. They've very cleverly named the task to hide amongst other non-malicious tasks. So in order to defend against this kind of technique, we need a solution that can see suspicious scheduled task creations and also to alert you to suspicious scripts running from a persistent entry in scheduled task registry or whatever their persistence seems to be. Scripting from a scheduled task, very important. So we dropped our payload. We've established persistence. Let's start the dirty work. Ying.exe loads unsigned .NET code utilizing loader DLL and loads the scripting library scrobj.ell in order to execute their malicious code. So your defenses will need to include detecting the suspicious loading of .NET binaries. And then process injection. So we've got those loaded, we've loaded those libraries. Ying.exe is going to inject some instructions to execute code. So in this case, instructions on how to contact its command and control server, this steamlearning-api.com. In order to stop this attack, you need defenses against process injections. And by the way, you just don't need defenses against process injections. You'll need the ability to whitelist certain process injections. Because there are a lot of legitimate software that do process injections. Things like Landesk, things like a lot of projection software. What am I trying to say? Presentation software. So if you go into and you get some presentation software, a lot of times they're going to inject their code into the application so that they can display it on whatever screen it is that you have. So it's important to be able to do some whitelisting on process injection as well, but it's not always malicious. And then finally, the T1094 command and control, they've downloaded their Cobalt Strike payload. And so now they're going to use Cobalt Strike to move laterally, exfiltrate data, really whatever it is they want. So your defenses need to be able to gather the proper telemetry to tell you when something out of the ordinary is happening, like DNS lookups to an unusual URI, or maybe seeing large DNS packets which could indicate, exfiltration over DNS. So once again, this overview of what the attack actually did, this Fileless attack. So that's how they operate. They're skilled, they're methodical, and they will get in if you're not prepared. And frankly, if you're prepared, they'll sometimes get in. No defenses are perfect. So what's the difference between all these models that we've talked about? So in my opinion, I think MITRE is the best way to allow you to keep on top of the specific techniques attackers are using right now, and enables you to prepare for the different techniques you're going to see on a day-to-day basis. Really, in my opinion, MITRE is the only one that lets you map and prepare for potential attacks, not attacks that happen, not attacks that are happening now, but potential attacks and specific techniques, or in other words, how to plan your defenses. So how do we know if we're protected against these techniques? Well, the only real way is to test. But how do you do that? Fortunately, there are some tools to help you, both free and commercial. So let's take a look at a few of those. First one is Red Team Automation. This is free, open source. You can just look up Red Team Automation on Google, and it'll show you the blog post and the GitHub link. It's a collection of Python scripts that you can run against your environment and see if your defenses detect the behavior. It's a great place to get started testing your current solution, or if you want to test new solutions against MITRE techniques. Next is Red Canary's Atomic Red Team. This is a more advanced tool than the Endgame Red Team Automation. It's better maintained right now, honestly. So Atomic Red Team is a PowerShell module that allows you to test your defenses against specific MITRE techniques by ID. So like RTA, but probably better than RTA, it's a great way to test both your current defenses and any new security products that you might be testing for your environment. And then finally, Attack IQ is commercially available software to help you formalize, and automate your testing. So you'll always know where you stand from a defensive perspective. Finally, just one little slide, no sales pitch here, just one quick slide about Elastic. Elastic at its core, it's a search company. It's a great security tool on its own, but now that we've acquired Endgame and its world-class prevention, EDR, and threat hunting capabilities, Elastic is now a world-class security solution and a leader in signatureless protections and the MITRE defense framework. So if you want to hear more about that, happy to oblige. You can get my contact information from the CSNP staff. So just want to thank everybody for your time. I think we got a little Q&A session. I saw some questions coming up on chat. Do we want to start with those, O'Shea, or how do you want to do this?
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Patrick. There are a few questions. Let me navigate over to. Can you hear me okay, Patrick?
I can hear you fine.
Awesome sauce. Actually, I have a quick question in regards to actually, because I've heard this before, and first, great presentation. In regards to the simulation of the attacks, where do you suggest individuals start if they are just beginning to formulate the idea and moving towards implementing coordinating kind of purple teaming attacks inside their organization, right? They're not going to rely on the pen testers. They're saying, hey, I like Attack MITRE. What do I need to do to actually truly start testing it? I like Red Canary. What do I need to know and what do I need to do?
You don't really need to know, excuse me. You don't really need to know a whole lot. That's what these tools are about. So you can take the RTA tools, you can take the Atomic Red Team tools. They're free. They don't cost you anything but time. And that time is not much. They're very easy to set up. And just see, run a simulated attack and see if your current defenses give you any detection or prevention capabilities. So, that's kind of why I gave out those two free tools to get everybody started. If they don't have a place to go, you said something at the very beginning of this about CSNP, helping people, what's the old phrase? A rising tide raises all boats. Well, Elastic is all about that. We're open source. We're very open, and we are, very open about what it is we do. We've open sourced all of our SIM rules, you know, so we're absolutely totally on board with that. And that's why I wanted to provide a couple of open source tools for you to get started, like RTA and Red Canary. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Good.
Awesome. One more question. How does attack MITRE framework relate to the NIST CSF?
So interesting question. So again, like I said, when I brought up NIST, is that NIST is more of a security policy guideline than it is a pure defense framework, right? So what you're going to do is, if when you're looking at NIST, is you want to see what they're going to define, what NIST is defining as things you need to do as part of your policy, and then use MITRE perhaps to actually do the physical framework of what your tools are going to do. So it's the NIST and MITRE are, I guess I would define the difference as how am I going to write my broad security policy versus now how am I going to implement that security policy, if that makes sense.
It does. It does.
So,
and when you this is actually it's a bit left, right? So when I know you mentioned the attack side of the tool sets. Do you have any recommendations for open source response and detection tool sets you may want to leverage inside of an environment to kind of bring it together? So you can have Elastic, bring in some of the Elastic tool sets from the open source perspective on one side. You can use like a Red Canary or Atomic for the testing perspective. But if let's say you're in the beginning stages of building out these programs, you know, what would you suggest to look at from a defense and a response capabilities perspective?
Well, I don't want to turn this into a product talk, but you asked the question, right? So
yeah, I did.
Elastic is freely available for download, right? So you can start right now and you can actually do trials with, in our 7.9 release, which I think is coming out in August, it's due to come out. You can actually try this for free. Just go out to elastic.co, you can build a cloud instance, you can enable security, and you can test it and see what you think about it. So again, I'm not trying to do a big advertisement for Elastic here, but it's the only one I know of that you can do a full protection against these techniques test without actually paying for it.
Hey, free's always the best.
In my mind. Free's good. Free is good.
Yes, it is. Free's the king.
Which is why we've taken that approach, that open source approach. But again.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see, there's another question. What's the best way to streamline the development patching workflow given detection of an issue found from various third-party tools?
Are you reading that off the chat? I'm trying to see if I can.
Yeah, it's in chat.
What is the best way? I'm not seeing this here. Can you say that? What's the best way to streamline development patching workflow given detection of an issue found from various third-party tools? Well, boy, that's a really open-ended question. I mean, the patching workflow is an entirely different animal from actually doing the detection. So you just have to. Yeah, I'm not sure I have a great answer for that question. It's just a matter of you have to develop a patching workflow yourself in order to find out, you know, where you need to go patch. I mean, this is, you test the vulnerabilities, right? And then you go through and you see if they're, because there's not always patches for vulnerabilities or excuse me, for MITRE techniques. All MITRE techniques are not necessarily vulnerabilities. So it's kind of a gray area in what you're saying. So for example, one of the MITRE techniques is net use or cat, you know, different files on a Linux system, cat/etc password, cat/etc groups, cat/, you know, but do you really want to know every time somebody does that? No. So it's a tight line you walk between the technique and the actual vulnerability. And it's important to note that MITRE doesn't really deal with vulnerabilities, it deals with techniques, right? So just because it's a MITRE technique doesn't mean there's necessarily a vulnerability involved. I hope that answers the question.
And I guess to piggyback on that, when you're, if you're in the position, this is just a recommendation. If you're in that position where, you need, you're looking for a specific program to handle that type of streamlining, it may be something where you have to look internally if the vulnerability assessment tool that you're leveraging doesn't have a way to rank or apply like a severity rating to those vulnerabilities. Like I've seen situations before where there is a scanner in place and you understand where the vulnerabilities may exist within your environment or even alongside the application. And what you can potentially do if you have JIRA is create different tags that are representative of the immediateness to mediate those vulnerabilities or address them. And you create different tags across your sprint. And then, maybe doing your grooming session, there's a specific time period where you address those specific tags or those specific tickets related to JIRA. So there's no way to kind of do this all in one. I think that's maybe what we're going towards, is like finding a solution where it handles, not only the vulnerability scanning aspect, but also streamlining, the workflow to patch. You may have to just kind of look outside the product and kind of look at, what you can do in house. And if you have JIRA, you can just essentially like tag what you need to remediate and create a schedule from there. Just a recommendation. I don't know if a tool that really does it all for you. If it's out there, I'd definitely love to hear about it and see it. But hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and an important point that you made there is that vulnerability detection is not what MITRE does. They a lot of the techniques that they define take advantage of vulnerabilities, but it's not a vulnerability tool. It's not a vulnerability management tool. It is an attack framework that allows you to see, what attacks are being used. Yep. So there's a question in the chat that I'd like to address because from Dan Morgan, it says it's only free if you don't value your time. And so let me address that head on, because I used to have that opinion. When I was with Endgame, we were open about what we did, but we didn't open source a lot. So when we became Elastic in October, there was a lot of talk about open sourcing and free and that kind of thing. So I've kind of come around on that concept. So you'll notice that Elastic is a publicly traded company and we make a pretty good bit of money. So we value all of our time. So I'm not trying to challenge you here, but trying to challenge that particular thought. So we certainly offer a lot of things that are open source and are free. But once you get to a certain point, you're going to have to license it, right? But you can also use that free stuff to get started. So again, as I think the CSNP group advocates, it's important to be able to get started and have people have a starting point that might be free in order to get to where they want to go. So again, I see your comment there, Dan. That's fine. Again, you can do this for free and determine. I don't think it's personally that hard, but
okay.
Fair enough. I'm not trying to challenge you. I'm just trying to answer your question as honestly as I can.
It's all friendly. Just curious minds meeting curious minds.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's what it's here for.
Okay, cool. I think Dan's good.
Yep.
While we have Patrick, are there any more questions that someone may want to ask? There's one. Can you run this on your home computer? Yes. Joaquin. Hopefully I didn't mispronounce that. Yeah, Joaquin. Yeah. Most of these tools are free. You can run them on your home computer. It just depends on some have OS dependencies. But something like MITRE, yeah, that's open source and can run on most OSs.
So yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you asking? I mean, MITRE is not something that you run. You can run the freeware tools on your home computer, sure, all day long. No problem there. They're just Python and PowerShell scripts. So no issues there.
Yeah, I think it may have been in reference to some of the tools you stepped to, like atomic and like Red Canary and things.
Absolutely, all of those can be run on your home. And now Attack IQ is not good for home use because that's a very expensive tool. But yeah, absolutely, those free tools are something you can run on your home network for sure.
Awesome. Cool. I don't see any more questions. I'll do a last call. Awesome. Well, yeah, I found it definitely eventful and educational. So I've been stepping more into the authentic realm myself. So I can personally vouch for it. If you sit down and kind of bang it out with like Atomic Red and some of the Canary tools, you'll attain some value. You know, you just have to kind of sit down and actually do it. But there's so much, so many resources out there and so many blogs that have supported most of these tools with individuals that are likely in the same positions some of us have found ourselves when it's time to actually put hands to keyboard and try these things out.
Right. O'Shea, there's been a couple of questions in the chat and the Q&A about a link for the slides.
Yes.
Should I provide those to you and you can pass them out, or
Yeah.
how do I do that?
Yeah, you can write it to us and then we will disseminate it. And then also the video, once over a couple of days, a period of editing, will be available on the CSNP YouTube channel. And again, if there's any questions around where most of the material is located, not only the videos, information about the Wednesday webinars, or if you'd like to volunteer, or the GitHub, that's all at csnp.org.
Sure. Yeah, and to answer the question, I'm happy to share the slides. So.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time and sharing that with us, Patrick. We greatly appreciate it. Definitely really cool stuff. We'd love to have you back again to maybe a part 2 of this.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and thank you for joining us on lunch hour. I know everyone was it's that special hour where you like to keep it to yourselves, but thanks for sharing your time with us. And also, if you have time, be sure to tune in tonight to the Wednesday webinar presented by CSNP, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard. Thank you, and have a good rest of your Wednesday.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.